This week on Talking Real, we dive into NAR's 2021 Profile of Home Staging, where we look to see just how much TV shows are influencing your buyers.
So, are they expecting to pick a house after a 30-minute session? Let's find out.
Welcome back to Talking Real, brought to you by the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. This is episode 164 of Talking Real, and you're in the studio with your hosts, Jeff and Nabil. And Nabil, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Welcome back to Oklahoma. You had a little vacation, a little trip out to the west. Did you have a good time?
I did. It was great to see family and spend time with them. And I like Seattle as a city. You know,
never been.
It's a little different than Oklahoma.
Slightly.
I love seeing the mountains in the background while you're driving. It's kind of cool
for sure.
And then there's the ocean on the other side. So
pretty fantastic. How's the housing market out there? I'm just kidding. Yeah. You didn't do any house shopping.
I did a little bit. No, I didn't. But it's my cousin was. I mean, he's kind of been looking around, but it's just as crazy as it is here.
Yeah. Only a lot more expensive.
Yeah. Just a little.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, welcome back. Glad to be back in the studio and recording another episode of Talking Real. Just to give you guys some highlights, we've got some episodes coming up with some guests that we're going to be having on the show here pretty soon. We're going to be talking about professional standards and the changes to Article 10.5 that was added, or Standard of Practice 10-5. So we're going to be getting into all that with a special guest that's coming on. We're real excited, and more coming down the pipeline. So get ready for that. But today we've got a little bit of a different episode for you. You know, Nabil and I just love talking statistics and numbers. And so we get real excited when NAR releases different kinds of profiles from their research group. This is great stuff. We've got very high level information coming in from surveys of realtors around the country that's really analyzed, put together by some of these big time economists at NAR because they are very good economists. And so it's really good to get this information that I think is very helpful and insightful in many respects. And so we're going to run through some of this. And what I love about what we're going to talk about today, this comes from their 2021 Profile of Home Staging. So it's kind of focused on home staging, but we're really going to get into more in depth of the buyers' expectations and specifically how TV shows influence buyers. So we're coming after the Property Brothers and talking about the damage that they've done.
Or fit or flip.
Exactly. So get ready. Shots are going to be fired at HGTV today.
I mean, I'm really excited to get into like that particular segment of this because that's just one of the sections of the whole report.
Right.
And the report in general talks about, how does staging help? How many people expected it to be staged? What did it do? And, most people would think that staging would help, and it does.
Yeah.
Right. Put up the median price, made the time on market a little shorter. And so I'm kind of excited about this little particular section of TV shows because who doesn't watch HGTV?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been an addict of that in different phases of life for sure. So, we can draw some of the broad conclusions just generally on home staging that really I think confirms what we already knew is that staging a home well does tend to reduce the time a house stays on the market, like you mentioned. It does tend to slightly increase the value of the home. What we saw here was somewhere between 1% to 5% is what they were looking at in terms of the perceived increase from staging the home.
And I wonder, because I didn't see a asterisk or a follow-up question to that, is that because staging a home brings in more offers, or is that because staging a home makes the initial offer higher?
That's an interesting question, yeah, because you could see where maybe it just makes that house look nicer, more appealing, and so they're willing to put a little bit higher offer because it just looks nicer versus, like you said, maybe it makes it a little more competitive. So that's kind of an interesting thought for sure. And of course, what we've seen, because this is from last year's data for the most part, what we're looking at here is that there was also a pretty overwhelming response that photos, videos, and virtual tours have become significantly more important since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And so we've seen that having that is more important even than staging, but that staging obviously does help. And that's something that we've, I think, known for a long time. I don't think there's anything new or surprising about that.
Right.
But, just kind of interesting to see how that's done. And again, confirm what I think we already knew.
Right. And as like a little sidebar, we did do an episode focused particularly on staging a home with a home stager,
Yes.
Nicole Glenn.
Yeah.
Episode 31. That's way back when.
That's way back.
In our first year of existence.
100 episodes ago. That's 2 years ago. Goodness.
So if someone's interested in diving into that topic, jump back to episode 31 to check that out.
For sure. So switching gears here, I think to what I find extraordinarily interesting. I've never seen any kind of study of this, of how has TV shows, how has that whole industry of HGTV, home shows, home buying shows, how has that changed buyers' perspectives? And this is no surprise that it does have an impact, right? I mean, I think
because everyone watches it.
Absolutely. But it's still weird to me that buyers can't necessarily disconnect that, like, that's a TV show and it's staged and it's scripted and planned out, and like how that is supposed to somehow translate to reality.
Wait, are you telling me that when I go buy a home, I won't see 3 houses and have to pick from one of those?
Right. I mean, that maybe. So to get into some of the specifics here, and some of it's not overwhelming, but it is a statistically significant number of people that are somewhat strongly influenced by TV shows. And this goes back to staging, because what they started to look at is, do buyers believe that shows, the way they are staged on shows, should be how they're staged in real life as well?
Because why not?
Not real life.
Because why not?
Exactly. So it starts off by looking at, how buyers feel about staging homes and whether they should be staged like they are in TV shows. Okay. And 37% of the respondents said that buyers did not say that homes should look like they were staged on TV shows, but 63% of respondents said that the buyers did cite that homes should look like they were staged on TV shows.
I'm actually surprised that 63% isn't higher.
I think it's crazy high. Like, this is 2/3 of people think that homes should look like they do on TV.
Right. But these are people that are basing their home buying process on TV shows. And maybe they're not first-time buyers, which is why they're like, this is not how this works. So maybe some people already have that expectation, which is great. But I am surprised that more people didn't think, or maybe they want but don't think, that they should look like it.
Yeah. It makes sense that, that has a strong influence on people. And I think we'll continue to see that it does have a very strong influence on buyers and what they think. But this is important for realtors to understand, that if you've got 2/3 of buyers out there that are thinking the homes, that if you staged it, or it should be staged, and when it is, it should look like they're staging it on HGTV or other TV shows, that's a very important thing to understand, because this next point talks about whether buyers were disappointed by how homes looked compared to those on TV shows.
And I think it's pretty much the exact same percentage.
Yeah.
32% of respondents said that buyers were not disappointed, because those were probably the same ones that expected it not to be staged.
Right.
And 68% of respondents said that buyers were disappointed by how homes look compared to the homes they saw on TV shows.
Yeah. So we're looking at, almost 70% of the realtors that responded to this said that they had buyers that were disappointed because a home was staged but didn't look like it does on TV.
I don't get it. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
I think that, one, it reiterates the importance of television and media on people's expectations, right? We know this. We know this is true. We know people are influenced by social media. They're influenced by advertising, which is why advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's huge. It does work. Even if you don't think you're being influenced by advertising, you are. And these shows, to a large extent, are advertising, right? It's just a big ad in many respects. And so it has an influence, and it does matter to people. And this is important, that if you're going to go through the cost and expense of staging, are you keeping up with these trends and things like that they're showing on TV? And are you trying to replicate that to some degree? Because there are people who that will have an impact on. They will be disappointed if it doesn't look that way. And that could ultimately affect the bottom line for the seller and what kind of offers are coming in.
Right. And if you are staging it yourself or using a staging service, everyone has their specialty style.
Right.
And, if that's not in, what is, and how quickly can you adapt to different ones? I think that's a very interesting, sub-industry to think about.
Absolutely. And it just shows that, things do change rapidly. This style that they're using, a lot of that's going to be, maybe something that we're seeing on the coast that maybe hasn't trended to Oklahoma yet, but are we still being influenced by that because people here are watching those shows?
Right.
So that is an important thing to keep in mind, that if you're going to go through the time and expense of staging, is it on trend with what we're seeing on TV? Because that's what is seeming to matter to people to some degree, and can create disappointment if it's not.
Right. And ultimately, isn't that the point of staging, is to make that house trendy and wantable? I couldn't think of a different word for that.
Desirable.
Desirable. Yes, that's what it is.
There you go.
So the next part of it says, do TV shows displaying the home buying process impact business? 31% of the respondents said that TV shows impacted their business, that displayed the buying process. So it sets those expectations, like I was saying. Do I see 3 houses and buy one?
Right.
And 37% of respondents said that TV shows which displayed the buying process did not affect their business. And then about that same percentage don't know.
Right.
Because, that's a kind of a tough thing to measure, right? Unless you ask someone specifically, is this what you thought it was going to look like? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think that it's enough to say, that we've got at least a third of our realtors out there that are saying that these TV shows are impacting their business in some way. It's changing expectations. It's changing how they're having to do business, or, to help explain things to buyers, so on and so forth, that it's having an impact, that buyers are coming into their office impacted by TV shows. And, I have to laugh because I think, as a lawyer, I think about it and I'm like, man, if a client comes into a lawyer's office and they're influenced by, Law and Order or something, and they probably are, I don't know. I don't have to deal with those kinds of issues, but it just kind of makes you wonder, what other professions have to deal with this issue of the way things are portrayed on a TV show, which is by all accounts largely fiction, even though maybe, they actually buy this house or whatever. This is, again, all a scripted, planned thing to make interesting TV,
right? But
that's still impacting people's, how they expect business to be done. And so, that's just another thing to keep in mind, that your buyers, even if you can look at that show and say it's ridiculous, how some of these things are done, that's not real life. You've got to be ready to walk your buyer through why that's not real life, and why, the actual way things are done may be a little bit different than this expectation they have from watching shows on HGTV.
Right. And so the next one dove into how the shows impacted their business.
Yeah.
And 71%, exactly what you were saying, said it set unrealistic or increased expectations.
Yeah.
And that's just, that you can see why that makes sense, because for a lot of people, talking about Law and Order or House or Scrubs or the Property Brothers or whatever it is, that may be the only exposure people have to that industry.
Right.
And they're like, oh, this is how it is, right? They don't know any better.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're not going to understand that process. They're not going to understand how homes should look, because this further goes on to say that 61% of these buyers had higher expectations of how homes should look. So that's going to be really up to you to set the stage up front so that they do have realistic expectations, so that they understand that, TV shows can only, they can only do so much, and they're cherry picking properties. They're staged in a particular way with, top of the line trendy furniture and things like that. And so,
it's scripted.
It's scripted. It's not real life. It's not real life. But, on the bright side, 27% said that more educated home buyers and sellers were also coming to the table. So you've got people coming in that aren't necessarily completely uneducated, have no clue how the process works. They at least have more education than those that don't watch the shows, or maybe back in a time before these shows existed.
Right. Yeah. So those TV shows have a good impact as well.
Yeah.
Because now people have kind of an idea of what they're looking for. They might have some better idea of how the process works, even if it's not completely accurate. So it does help, but I think that's the job of, you as a realtor when you meet your clients, is to set those expectations. So now they know what to actually expect.
Exactly. Exactly. So kind of an interesting little take there on what was going on with sort of their expectations and how it impacts business. And then going back to staging, there was a question of do these TV shows influence realtors that when they're staging a home, to stage them as they see on TV. So are realtors actually following that TV trend and trying to stage their homes like this? Because you remember we saw 2/3 of the respondents were saying that people thought they should be staged like they are on TV. And that same amount were disappointed if they weren't staged like on TV. And what we saw here was that 35% of the respondent realtors stated that they were influenced to stage homes as they would see them on TV, which is kind of interesting that you've got a little bit of a disconnect there, where 2/3 of the people want them, the buyers want them staged like they are on TV, but only 1/3 of the realtors are staging them like they see on TV, or the staging companies that they're using are staging them like they see on TV.
Right.
And they didn't go into what that means by what does as seen on TV mean. But again, that's where you've got to, go online to these shows or watch the shows on TV and everything and sort of see how they look when they're staged.
Right.
And so sometimes they're staged in very impractical ways that you're like, who would actually live in that? That's not a practical way to have a house. But again,
looks good on TV.
Right. Looks good on TV, and maybe it looks good in person when a buyer walks in to look at the house.
Right. Right. So this was just one section of the whole report.
Yeah.
Right. So you can actually, if you want to read this whole report, because it also goes into which areas people thought are most important to stage. Because, if you don't have the budget or the time to stage the whole house, you could focus on the important areas like the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, whatever that is. So this report goes into all of that info. So if you want to go check out this report, it is on NAR.Realtor, and you click the Research and Statistics tab, and you find the profile of home staging, the 2021 survey.
Absolutely. So check this out. There's 37 pages of this report here. Lots of really interesting information. It goes on and talks about buyers agents' perspectives, sellers agents' perspectives on home staging. It talks about buyers' expectations more broadly, as well as what we've talked about today on how TV shows influence buyers. So, I think that that's, again, something that you've got to grasp as reality, that buyers are going to be influenced, and sellers, they're all going to be influenced by what they see on TV.
And us.
Absolutely. And it's going to have some amount of impact on a noteworthy number of people that aren't going to be able to look at that and just recognize that that is not necessarily real life. And so that's going to impact their expectations.
Right.
But at the same time, maybe they're going to come into your office and they're going to be a little more educated, a little more prepared. And so that's going to be a good thing to help navigate that process if they kind of already have an understanding a little bit of what that looks like, even if it's from the TV shows. So keep that in mind. So it tells you that maybe realtors should be watching a little bit of HGTV every once in a while to see what the Property Brothers are up to. I keep throwing shade at the Property Brothers. I don't mean to. I like those guys. They seem like perfectly nice guys. It's just what was on my mind. So I am throwing a lot of shade at them. But, again, they're out there doing their job, and it does have an impact. So keep that in mind as you carry out your business.
Let's call it continuing education.
There you go. Absolutely. So if you've had some sort of impact like this, I'd love to hear your stories. Send us an email to podcast@OKRealtors.com. OKRealtors.com. If you've had some sort of experience with a client where their expectations were off the wall because of TV shows or some other way that TV shows influence their, how their expectations were,
Right.
we'd love to feature
Or
that on
maybe
the
a happy
podcast.
story.
Maybe a good story.
Or how it helped.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let us know.
That's right. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button so you know when that next episode is released. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a rating, write us a review. We love hearing from you.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday on Talking Real.